than a political orientation, despite everything. I would not disagree with this point. But I would not describe this orientation from disaster to disaster as guided by some definable end or telos. Indeed, I would insist that Lyotard was practicing an interruption of such a relation, if we understand this as a passage from or through a form of exile toward an eventual return to some restored political order that we could finally name human. The relation between the inhuman and the inhuman, or disaster and disaster, as he explored and practiced it, allowed no such dialectical recovery. The relation was what Blanchot would have named an interrupted or a neutral one. And this brings us to the essential point I want to offer with regard to the notion of a pedagogy of disaster. Namely, that if it is to be worthy of this name, it must be truly exilic, and that its only truth will inhere in its eternally repeated passage outside, toward what Lyotard obscurely designated with the minimal term, there. I believe we must be uncompromising on this point and resist the temptation to smuggle back some political comfort. I will add, however, that in those moments when I have thought I have actually engaged a pedagogy of disaster, I should say those rare moments, as for example in exploring what Blanchot is saying when he draws from Robert Antelme's L'espèce humaine the devastating words, man is the indestructible, and this means he can be infinitely destroyed. In those moments, those rare moments, I have experienced the unmistakable presence of a growing ethico-political urgency. That is to say, the more I have approached what I have referred to too loosely as the disaster, the more the imperative of a just response to human suffering or human vulnerability has come to the fore, and the more I have experienced a freedom to entertain the question of that justice. This is why I believe one can say that the pedagogy of disaster both releases and orients toward the thought of an ethico-political relation that would maintain some form of non-forgetting with respect to the other. Now one might retort, but how long do you think we can endure this passage in the desert, given the effect of that other disaster that is unfolding in the socioeconomic sphere and that threatens to destroy the conditions of this form of pedagogy? I have no simple answer to that question beyond the one that Blanchot offered, namely in an acknowledgement that a pedagogical stance which intervenes on the scene of representation with some political intention is in fact unavoidable. One must always practice, therefore, a double stance. One must analyze and respond to the ambient disaster in critical terms, political terms, if you will, even while pursuing a more uncertain exilic path. One must carry the burden of this contradictory double imperative. Again, I won't disagree, but I would suggest that it is our task to find ways to think the first path, which is the path of social critique,